Colombian presidential candidate Gustavo Petro canceled his regional tour due to threats from a paramilitary group. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree on economic measures in retaliation to unfriendly actions by certain foreign countries and international organizations. Simultaneous large explosions were heard in around 2 Somali army bases, with the military confirming at least 9 of its people killed and 11 others injured. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Leo Martin, from the Telesur studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Colombian presidential candidate Gustavo Petro canceled his regional tour due to threats from a paramilitary group. The candidate of the historical pact announced on Monday on social media that he had to call off a campaign tour through the central region of the coffee axis in Colombia due to a possible attempt on his life by the criminal gang La Cordillera. Meanwhile, the campaign group Petro Presidente indicated that an agent of the sectional units of judicial and criminal investigation, SIJIN, who participated in the murder of the social leader Lucas Villa during the national data, would join this paramilitary group to make an attempt against the leftist candidate. La Cordillera is a paramilitary group involved in drug trafficking and hired assassinations. According to leaders of the historical pact, the group has achieved control of police and of political authorities of this region. In Ecuador, violence continued despite state of emergency measures. Police officers said violence increased in Guayaquil, Duran, and San Borondón, and the number of murders exceeded 460 so far this year. Some of them occurred precisely during the first holiday. Law enforcement officers also said they were working in small cities that were not included in the curfew, such as Manta, Macha, Quevedo, and there is a way to contain the violence. Interior Minister Patricio Carrillo stated that the priority is the confiscation of drugs, and said that more than 80 tons of drugs have been seized so far in 2020. All of them very close to ports. According to the minister, narcotics are moved by water, airplanes, and other means. And in Mexico, the 16th caravan of Central American mothers continues its journey through the Mexican state of Chiapas in search of missing migrants. Upon their entry into Mexican territory, they have been given a document that will allow them to stay in the country for 180 days legally. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the caravan was stuck in traffic in the municipality of Pijipapan in the Chiapas due to a road blockade by cattle ranchers demanding support from the federal government. Roberto Chapula de la Mora, a local deputy of the Green Ecology Party, was shot to death in the city of Colima. According to the first reports, armed individuals attacked the deputy and one of his companions outside his house, located on Juarez Street, very close to Hidalgo Park. The victim's companion was injured during the attack. According to official information, after the assault, the state authorities implemented a search operation to find those responsible for the crime. In this regard, Colima's governor, Indira Vizcaíno, condemned the events and sent her condolences to the victims' relatives and said the state prosecutor's office will carry out the necessary actions to find the culprit. Chapula de la Mora was a leader of lawyers' organizations and had been a local deputy for the Institutional Revolutionary Party on 2 occasions. Puerto Rico's independence movement began to mobilize. The island's 2-party insolvency and the current acute crisis deepened by corruption are renewing the momentum of the anti-colonialist movements, which are preparing the groundwork for the upcoming elections. Based on the positive results of the November 2020 elections, when they won more than 60% of the vote against 32% for the bipartisan New Progressive Party and the Popular Democratic Party, the pro-independence supporters are outlining their electoral strategies. The primary objective is to reach the government of the island, but the most important one is to achieve independence from the United States, according to them. This is how the voices that lead the movement expressed themselves during the 47th Festival of Support for the newspaper Claridad. Stricken by corruption under the deception of a recovery that is not coming, the island exhibits historical indexes of insecurity. The last study assures that 52% of its citizens are on the poverty line. Against this backdrop, the historic independence leader Rubén Berríos said it is time to push hard for the decolonization of Puerto Rico because the United States left the door open.
What to do in this new situation? That is the big question that those of us who believe in independence have to ask ourselves, and those who believe in decolonization, even if they are not yet independent. What is fundamental? What is essential? and I want everyone to listen to me, is the following. The United States is not going to move unless the Puerto Rican people cause a political crisis that forces them to respond.
Barrios, who is also the leader of the Socialist International, called for a joint effort to win the next elections and thus forced the United States to recognize its decolonizing obligation.
The question is, what are we going to do? Well, the conditions are in place to cause this crisis. The first thing to do is to obtain political power here in Puerto Rico to cause the crisis to the United States from that power.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed international organizations. As the dignitary Putin said, these special economic measures are in response to hostile legal actions by the U.S. and certain countries and international organizations. Actions, he labeled them, contrary to international law, aimed at unlawfully depriving or limiting the right to property of the Russian Federation, of Russian citizens, and of Russian legal bodies. The dignitary instructed the government to draw up within 10 days the list of persons which will be subject to the sanctions. Under the new decree, individuals and entities under Russia's jurisdiction are prohibited from entering into cooperation agreements and financial transactions with companies and individuals subject to these sanctions. The decree also prohibits the export of Russian products and raw materials. On Tuesday, Russian General Alexander Bastrykin, chairman of an investigative committee, said that the United States has invested more than $224 million in funding biological programs in Ukraine since 2005. Bastrykin said that while investigating the manufacturing of biological weapons of mass destruction in Ukraine, they have uncovered evidence of the involvement of Pentagon officials and of U.S. companies. Bastrykin said there is evidence of Washington's involvement with several units of the Ukrainian Ministries of Health and Agriculture, as well as with sanitary and epidemiological facilities under the supervision of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Bastrykin said that all research findings had been transferred to Kyiv prior to the start of the Russian military operation. However, Moscow-based investigators found data on the testing of potentially dangerous biological drugs on psychiatric patients in the Kharkiv region. Amidst the latest scandal in Spain for the spying on senior government officials through the Israeli software Pegasus, more Catalan and independence leaders have filed lawsuits on Tuesday against the head of government, Pedro Sánchez. They denounced that their fundamental rights have been thoroughly violated. The former president of the Generalitat, Quim Torra, and the former vice president of Parliament, Josep Costa, have announced the legal action against the president of the Spanish government. They claim to have been victims of illegal espionage and, as such, will go to the Supreme Court with a lawsuit for the protection of fundamental rights. Both denounced at the time and ratified today at least 8 interventions in 2020 and 4 in 2019, when, as they claim, they were going through politically or judicially sensitive times. Other leaders of the Catalan independence movement have already initiated or announced their intention to initiate similar legal proceedings. They claim that the government president is the representative and responsible of the state of intelligence services. This Monday, the Minister of the Presidency, Felix Bolaños, announced that the telephones of the head of government and the Minister of Defense, Margarita Robles, had been spied on, which corroborates the allegations they had repeatedly made, which went unheeded by the Spanish executive, who failed to investigate them.
There have been 2 interventions on the president's cell phone in May 2021 and 1 intervention on the defense minister's cell phone in June 2021. There is no evidence of any further intervention after these dates.
In Armenia, hundreds of people demonstrated in Yerevan, the capital and seat of government, for the second consecutive day to demand the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Opposition groups protesting in the Armenian capital are demanding the resignation of the premier for making unilateral concessions on Nagorno-Karabakh. The arrest of another 70 people on Tuesday brings to 320 the number of people arrested over the last 2 days. Since April 25th, the opposition has been trying to increase pressure on the streets and is calling for demonstrations of civil disobedience throughout Armenia. As a result of a war launched by Azerbaijan in the fall of 2020 to recapture Nagorno-Karabakh, Yerevan lost control over more than two-thirds of the territories in and around the disputed region under its control since the 1990s. The United Kingdom Home Secretary Priti Patel is facing mass legal action over delays that have left thousands of Ukrainians at risk or in the limbo in Eastern Europe. According to The Guardian, a class action lawsuit is being prepared on behalf of hundreds of Ukrainians who applied to travel to the UK weeks ago, but whose cases have been stuck in a chaotic visa backlog. Charities including Save the Children and the Refugee Council said the Homes for Ukraine program must be overhauled urgently as it was endangering vulnerable children and adding trauma on top of existing trauma. The chronic delays have been compounded by the Home Office approving many visas but failing to notify the successful applicants. According to the latest government figures, only 15% of the more than 70,000 Ukrainians who applied under the sponsorship route have made it to Britain. Eurozone unemployment fell to a record low in February as the economy continued to rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic, even as energy prices rose sharply in the build-up to Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. The European Union's statistics office, Eurostat, said unemployment in the 19 countries sharing the euro fell to 6.8% of the workforce in February from a revised 6.9% in January. The February rate is the lowest since records began in 1998. Just before the official launch of the euro in January 1999. Eurostat said more than 11,155 million people were without a job in the Eurozone in February, down from 11,336 million a month earlier. Hundreds of pro-choice activists took to the streets of Washington after news that the United States Supreme Court may overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling which legalized abortion nationwide. The protest erupted on Monday night just hours after a leaked opinion draft published by Politico that indicated the 1973 ruling is set to be overturned. Pro-abortion supporters appeared distraught as they held signs saying, "We will not go back" during the rally. Abortion is one of the most divisive issues in United States politics and has been so for nearly half a century. The draft opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito described the historic Roe v. Wade case law which guaranteed constitutional protections of abortion rights as wrong. A report from Politico said there could be 5 votes to overturn Roe, and an official ruling is expected sometime before the end of June.
Honestly, I didn't think they would dare to go there. I thought they would try to constantly chip at Roe v. Wade and kind of restrict access instead of making it completely illegal or up to the states. I didn't think they would take it this far, and that just goes to show how dire, organization is right now and how important it is for people to speak out.
And we're not going to go silently. We're going to fundraise for abortion funds that are going to help people in red states get abortions in blue states. We're going to train people how to do self-managed abortion, which is very, very safe, and we're going to fight back.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. Simultaneous large explosions were heard in and around 2 Somali army bases, with the military confirming at least 9 of its people killed and 11 injured. The Al-Shabaab extremist group claimed responsibility for the attack. Residents said the assaults occurred in 2 villages of Lower Shabelle region, 75 kilometers south of the capital, Mogadishu. Speaking to local media, the commander of the Somali National Army confirmed the twin attacks but said Al-Shabaab had been repulsed with heavy losses among the extremists. He added his forces were still chasing the fleeing fighters. There have been fears that the al-Qaeda-linked group would be emboldened by Somalia's current political crisis as President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed is under pressure to step aside. Elections meant for February have been delayed. The United Nations Secretary General stated that terror attacks in Africa's Sahel region continued to increase and warned they were no longer a regional issue but a global threat. Antonio Guterres made the remarks during a visit to Niger as part of his three-nation tour of West Africa. During a joint briefing with Niger President Mohamed Bazoum, Guterres said as terrorist attacks increased in the Sahel and the spread to the Gulf of Guinea states, the international community must realize that the situation is no longer a regional or African issue but a global threat. He also reaffirmed peace and stability in Niger and the Sahel region was a top priority for the UN and reiterated calls for more resources to tackle the problem. During his visit, Guterres held meetings with Niger's head of state as well as cabinet ministers and members of the country's National Assembly.
But beyond the security dimension, the region is facing a multi-dimensional crisis of a real scale, and only a large, urgent and coordinated international mobilization will make it possible to respond to it. We must fight the root causes: poverty, exclusion, impunity, and food insecurity, the climate crisis, which exacerbate intercommunal tensions and continue to fuel violent extremism and terrorism in many countries around the world, but also here in the Sahel. This requires a comprehensive approach that simultaneously tackles underdevelopment, while strengthening the link between peace, humanitarianism, and development.
Mali's ruling junta announced it was breaking off from its defense accords with former colonial ruler France, condemning flagrant violations of its national sovereignty by the French troops there. The announcement, threatened several times over the past few weeks, was the latest confirmation of deteriorating relations between the junta and Mali and France. Spokesman Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga cited multiple instances of French forces having violated the country's airspace. He referred to the June 2021 decision by France to end joint operations with Malian forces. The agreements Mali ended were those that set the framework for France's intervention in Mali in 2014. They were signed a year after French troops deployed a large force to help Mali's armed forces stop a jihadist offensive there. France's relationship with Mali cooled as the junta resisted international pressure to set a timetable for a swift return to democratic civilian rule.
For some time now, the government of the Republic of Mali notes with regret a profound deterioration in military cooperation with France.
Muslims in Iran celebrated the first day of Eid al-Fitr on Tuesday at the end of the holy month of Ramadan, with worshippers across the country gathering en masse to hold prayers to mark the festive occasion. After fasting for a month, Muslims took part in 8 prayers across Iran, which marked the end of Ramadan, the holiest month in the Islamic calendar. The office of leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, announced the beginning of Eid al-Fitr after receiving multiple reports from reliable religious scholars on the sighting of the crescent moon. The 8 prayers have over the years been led by Ayatollah Khamenei at the Grand Prayer Grounds in Tehran, but the event was cancelled for the 3rd consecutive year as part of measures to put in place to contain the spread of the coronavirus. This year's prayers were held in the open campus of the University of Tehran with a large number of participants, as well as in other mosques in the capital under strict health protocols.
And when one fights against their desires, they can reach high levels. In this prayer, you're talking to your God. You know that your host is the owner of all beings. It is a very special feeling. Fasting was...
Thousands of Muslims gathered at New Delhi's Jama Masjid to offer prayers on Eid al-Fitr, the end of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The massive event was held for the first time in over 2 years due to pandemic restrictions. Unfortunately, the celebrations this year came in the backdrop of a series of recent attacks against the Muslim community during the month of Ramadan. A woman was pulled out alive on Tuesday from the rubble of a building that collapsed 4 days ago in central China. The commercial building in Changsha City, which housed apartments, a hotel, and a cinema, caved in on Friday, sparking a massive rescue effort with hundreds of emergency responders. State broadcaster CCTV showed footage of a person wrapped in a thick striped blanket being carried on a stretcher, the 9th person to be extracted from the rubble in 4 days. The search and rescue operation was ongoing Tuesday at the site of the disaster. At least 14 people were still known to be trapped in the rubble, while no contact had been established with 39 that still are missing. According to the police, 9 people, including the building's owner and a team of safety inspectors, have been detained while they are connected with the incident. Freedom of media is extremely important for its efficient functioning, which is why every year May 3rd is celebrated as World Press Freedom Day. The day acts as a reminder for governments to uphold the right to freedom of expression. In 1993, May 3rd was declared World Press Freedom Day. This declaration came after a recommendation was made in 1991 at the 26th General Conference session of UNESCO. The day aims to celebrate the fundamental principles of press freedom, assess the state of press freedom around the world, defend the media against the attacks on its independence, and pay tribute to journalists who have lost their lives while performing their duty. The theme for this year's World Press Freedom Day was Journalism Under Digital Siege, which, according to the United Nations, spotlighted the multiple ways in which the industry is endangered by surveillance and digitally mediated attacks on journalists, and the consequences of all this on public trust in digital communications. With that, we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at Tulsa English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Tulsa English, I am Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.